All right, welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Vince Del Monte podcast. I have got a new friend here today, a dear friend of two of my dear friends, Beatrice Coolin and Rachel Shear, and they've both said that you need to get Dr. GABRIELLE LYON on your podcast. And as I was doing some research, I'm thinking about what should we chat about today? And for anybody looking for anything related to optimizing metabolism, balancing hormones, improving longevity, any form of evidence-based advice to improve your nutrition, she has got so many resources on her websites, and we're going to get all that on YouTube, on her social media, and I'm going to encourage you to dig into all of her science-based advice. Before we hit record, I got extra excited because she started sharing with me who she works with, and we're going to kick off this podcast having her tell us who she is, what she does, and I think what's going to be most exciting, the type of individuals she works with are the type of people who listen to this podcast, individuals like myself who are very ambitious. We are very high achieving, very self-determined, but we all have something in common that we're not proud of. We have subpar nutrition habits, lifestyle habits. And today we're going to talk about a concept that I love. It's called the predictable entrepreneur. I'm not going to steal a show. I'm going to let her talk all about it because I never heard that concept before, the predictable entrepreneur, because man, oh man, this business is rough. It's constant highs and lows. It's an emotional roller coaster. And if we don't have the information that we're going to learn today, you're going to be your own worst enemy. So Dr. GABRIELLE LYON, welcome.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's just hear a bit about your background. I'd love to hear how you got into this whole world. I don't know how much you know about my backstory, but really quick, I had a fascination and obsession about muscle. So as I was going through all your work, I'm like, so does she. But my reason for muscle was more, vanity.
Yeah.
Right. But now I'm starting to see you're unpacking all the science around, the necessity of muscle. And I just love to hear kind of your journey into this whole world.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. Well, first of all, I did a long route, as it were to be, to get here, about 17 years of professional education. And I started on this journey at 17, and I have not changed my mind since that time.
Wow.
Which is unusual. Typically we find other things that we like, but I started on this health and wellness, nutrition and medicine quite some time ago. And I have been lucky enough to be trained by some of the world leading experts, truly thought leaders and individuals that have high intellectual integrity, especially in the space of nutritional sciences and medicine. And over the years, I created a concept called muscle-centric medicine. And that is this idea that muscle is actually the largest organ in the body. And why that's important is because the medical system as it is right now is broken. And we are fat phobic, disease centric, when we should be forward thinking and muscle centric.
Wow. But before we dive into some of this, can I ask you some rapid fire questions,
Yeah.
just to see if we're on the same page kind of thing?
Yes.
So all right. And I want you to say either true, false, or let me clarify.
Okay.
So one of my favorite lines when I was a trainer in the gym, this was many years ago, was muscle will improve the quality of your life. Cardio can improve the length of your life. What do you think of that?
I think muscle can improve all of it. All of it. And, muscle is it's a highly complex tissue. There's different fiber types. And it's, right now we break it down typically into cardiovascular realms, and then we break it down into weightlifting and more anaerobic, but truly the magic is in the interface between the two.
Now, is it true that I always used to say this as well, that muscle, how did I say it? It's a metabolic marker for essentially not your chronological age, but your biological age. It's essentially, the more muscle on you, the better chance of longevity. And I always use the comparison. If you saw some jack dude in the gym who's in his 60s, you're like, he does not look like he's 60. Yeah. Why is that? Is that true?
I think this is a really good point. The idea that more is better, it's more about the health of the muscle
Mm.
and high quality, healthy muscle is better. When you think about pushing it to the bodybuilding ranges, that doesn't necessarily mean their survivability is longer. They're going to live longer. That's not particularly true.
Mm.
But what is true, and what we do know from science, is the more healthy muscle tissue you have, the higher your survivability in nearly all diseases.
Okay. I have never heard the concept of healthy muscle, and now I'm fascinated. I try not to take us down too much of a tangent, but you're going to have to unpack that. And I know, like, I've been in the bodybuilding world, so I know guys who get like massive amount of muscle tissue. And I don't know if it's a glycogen water rate, or, I don't know if it's like dry muscle tissue, if that's the right term, but yeah. What do you mean by healthy muscle?
It's interesting to think, if we believe that muscle is an organ, then we must believe in the concept that there are levels of health, on an organ or in an organ. For example, cardiovascularly, thyroid, muscle is the same. And if an individual is overweight and perhaps even not doing some kind of aerobic exercise to help with mitochondrial density, then over a period of time, fat actually infiltrates into the muscle.
Fat can infiltrate into the muscle.
Exactly like a marbled steak.
Huh. Oh, wow.
And what happens is this changes the contractility, the strength of the muscle. It changes the quality of the muscle. It changes the metabolic nature of the muscle in terms of metabolism. In essence, it's not necessarily about the amount of muscle you have. It is truly about the quality of the tissue.
All right. You can't leave me hanging here. So can we maybe run through a couple of best practices? I was telling you that our family lives off of red meat. My blood type might be red meat. I eat so much.
Same over here. Yeah.
Okay. So, and I was told, we did a hair analysis like many years ago, and he wasn't a huge fan of vegetables. And it was the first time I'd heard somebody like, this guy was super smart. And he just didn't speak very highly of vegetables. And it's probably one of my first interactions with anybody who was like, yeah, you get all your vitamins and minerals from red meat. I'm like, I do? I didn't know that. And he said, yeah, I just eat red meat all the time. I'm like, can you maybe just dispel or just share some truth or some advice around, like, why is red meat so crucial? And is all red meat created equal? Because I know that's probably not true, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this.
Well, number one, red meat is part of a healthy diet, and we've been eating it for millions of years. In fact, learning how to cook and consume these foods are one of the things that actually helped train and change and evolve our brain and our best practices as humans. Red meat has highly bioavailable nutrients, zinc, selenium, B12, things that are not necessary. Iron, most importantly, was one of the most important. And so there's the micronutrients that are not necessarily bioavailable through plant matrices, right? Plant matrix holds on to these nutrients. It's just the absorption is not the same. In addition, the quality of the protein, in Chinese medicine, there's this saying that like feeds like. I'm sure you've kind of heard that. Well, it's the same with muscle tissue. Muscle tissue contains the amino acids necessary when you eat it to actually help feed your tissue in the right amounts. The quality and the quantity is just easier to absorb. It's so much better than a plant. However, that's not to say that you couldn't get nutrients out of plants. It's just certainly not as optimal from a nutrient and then a calorie standpoint. And listen, if you're an entrepreneur and people that are really trying to go out there and change the world, which you actually mentioned, who are the people that I take care of? I take care of people that change the world. Yes. And then you asked me about, are all meats created equal? Now, this will actually go against what I think a lot of people would assume I would say. And I do believe whether it is conventionally raised versus regeneratively raised, it is still beneficial. I would much rather have an individual eating a high quality protein source than having something else.
Interesting. Wow. That's fantastic. So what do you do with individuals that might be resistant to meat, or like maybe I just love to hear, like, if I'm going for a gram of protein per pound of body weight, is it going to come from a variety of red meat sources? Does it matter, or how you're rotating your sources?
Well, there's a couple answers to that. Food rotation is really good if anyone has any GI issues. Food rotation becomes helpful in the way that the body doesn't, I don't want to say build up antibodies to the same foods over a period of time, because that's not exactly correct, but you do build up elements of a response, right? And people that are listening, I'm sure have had that, like, oh, I used to be able to eat eggs all the time, and I ate eggs every day for 2 years. And now if I eat an egg, my nose runs, or now if I eat an egg, something happens. And, people have those experiences clinically all the time. Being able to rotate foods can be important, right? If you do have any kind of GI issues. The other aspect to that is variety. Is it important? Variety is not nearly as important if you are getting other sources of foods. For example, if you are eating steak, you could always eat your ribeye, and your ribeye can always come from your cow, and you can throw in a little bit of liver. So you wouldn't necessarily have to just rotate off your ribeye.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Fascinating. So let's, is there any like major, let's talk about the mistakes. We're talking about, I want to shift to the high achieving entrepreneurs, the elite CEOs, anybody who's looking to get maximum, I think maybe output, individuals who have to make a lot of decisions. I got kids at the end of the day, relationships, a lot of constant pressures. What are you seeing, amongst a lot of individuals that you work with, some of the top executives and business owners? Where are they falling short? Let's start there before we start giving them the additions.
Well, the first thing that I would have to say in terms of where an entrepreneur falls short is there is a battle rhythm to an entrepreneur. There is a predictable nature to the chaos of the life of an entrepreneur.
That sounds accurate.
The one blind spot that an entrepreneur has is they are surprised by their humanness, and they are surprised by weaknesses that show up, which, because there is a predictability in the entrepreneur's life, these weaknesses show up, like I said, routinely. It's cyclical. Again, there is a battle rhythm, and they never account for that. My one biggest piece of advice, I would say, when I talk to my CEOs and, SEALs, I take care of a lot of military special ops guys, is you have to plan for your weaknesses because they're predictable. And we could talk about, hey, well, what does that weakness mean? That weakness, let me give you an example. As an entrepreneur's life, business grows, the workload and the stress is exponentially higher. With that exponential increase comes a exponential decrease in their health. They are pushing harder. They are managing more time. Then there's children. There are all these things. There are deadlines. There are business things that happen. And there are vices that individuals will go to. That could be as simple as more stimulants. And maybe it's not a drug stimulant, but maybe it's 5 more cups of coffee or anything, right? They'll start to do behaviors that they will need in order to augment themselves to get them through the next push. Then there's a predictable crash.
You're describing me for the past 2 years before I started 75 hard when my third came around.
There's a space for you in my practice, Vince.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, I'm an open book. I want to optimize. I've noticed like a world of difference since, getting to bed at a better time. Big thing is like zero alcohol. I was living off of a bottle of wine every night for like 3 years just to take the edge off at the end of the day. Exactly. Mess up my sleep. And then the next day, 300-400 milligrams of caffeine to get through the day. And then it starts to teeter off. Now I'm taking more in the afternoon, and I'm just living for the evening. And then the cycle repeats itself. And, the idea of resting and taking responsibility of it was like, no, this will set me back. There wasn't an ROI, perceived by it. So let's talk about the cost, like what it's costing us. Yeah. I think, because that's Sometimes us entrepreneurs need to hear about the cost before we are open to hearing about the rewards.
Yeah. And this is actually, that is the way in which my practice works. I very rarely focus on the positive. And it's not that I am a negative person by any means. It's positivity as it relates to health doesn't necessarily motivate people, right? And this is counterintuitive to what people think. And it's only in particular as it relates to health. I'm actually going to talk to some warfighters about this very situation. The cost of not understanding your rhythms is devastating. And here's why. While in the short term, individuals will say, I'm just going to drink to take the edge off, and then I'm going to have some caffeine. And that caffeine is going to, I'm going to continue to increase that dose. What ultimately happens is there is a cascade downstream effect. When you affect your sleep, for example, which is super common for all entrepreneurs, and you're doing it in a way that is not structured, right? There are times that you are going to have to push. There are times that you're going to have minimal sleep, but you haven't prepared for that. You have a decrease in hormones, testosterone tanks, cortisol increases. You begin to put on visceral body fat, that central truncal body fat. You also typically are not going outside, right? Vitamin D now becomes low. You're not taking supplements, probably are not eating that great. Now you're dealing with nutrient deficiencies. Maybe you're taking Tums. Maybe your digestion is off because you're not giving your body any kind of capacity to manage stress. The other thing is, one of the most critical aspects of an entrepreneur is their capacity to serve and perform at the absolute highest level is directly related to only one thing. Do you know what that is? It's only related to one thing.
Your energy?
Your health.
Your health. Yep.
That is it. That is 100% top of the line limit.
Wow.
Okay. Now, as entrepreneurs, they're really capable at juggling a lot of things. They lose perspective on the fact that if your health and wellness are not your number one priority, your business will only grow to the level of your physical capacity.
That's amazing. So it's interesting because I just hired Bedros for his last year of private one-on-one coaching. And, I was in the Empire Mastermind a few years ago. And it was interesting because I noticed that, I hired him again to learn his replication secrets for additional, companies he's taken equity and et cetera. And I noticed the common theme amongst a lot of these guys in their mid 40s is that they're just kind of ramping up. Like they're getting into the best shape of their life. They're seeing their abs for the first time. And, during the mastermind, he's got his meals coming to him every 3 hours and they're dialed in. And I'm trying to think, did I just pay all this money to learn how to eat better? Did I just pay all this money? Like, when are they teaching me the strategies and the tactics? And don't worry, we got all that. But it was a really interesting thing to see amongst a lot of these high performers that they were going back to things that they might have been good at in the past, or they kind of had an awareness of, but like you said, they didn't prepare for this new season of life,
right?
With multiple companies, with more at stake, with, maybe kids in the picture, more relationships. And that's what really threw me off. I'm like, I could stay shredded all year long when I had no kids. Well, I didn't prepare for now. I've got a team of 35. I've got over 100 people that pay me for coaching. I'm like, the stress.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on here? I'm breaking. I didn't think it was possible for me to break.
I think you bring up a really good point. And there is a level of discipline that has to happen. And then you also have to understand when an entrepreneur is locked in on something, they're locked in on it. They have a capacity to go full throttle. And that means nutrition. And that means, sleep, and really creating, even if they are not disciplined in, ways of, like, maybe they do like a drink, they create as a structure of discipline that this is just what they do. That structure of discipline is paramount. The other thing that they do is they don't necessarily do it by themselves.
Yeah.
One must understand that the nature of an entrepreneur, they do not have time to worry about their blood work or their, testosterone doses. They have someone on their team like me who manages all the things related to health and wellness to keep them in an optimal range. And, as new things are coming in, right, there's always new evolving peptides or things or ways of testing that really makes things very efficient.
Yeah.
And you have someone else manage it. So what I do see in terms of my most successful entrepreneurs is they manage their nutrition, they manage their training, and then they outsource the rest to a physician. I mean, I can only speak for myself, to someone like myself, right? Who manages hormones, sleep studies, digestive health, any of the other new and upcoming things. And also, there's a way in which you can work together to prepare for the big pushes.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question. How do you like kind of tier these things out, like in a sequence, steps almost like, you're talking about peptides and hormones. Like, let's talk about like some of the things where you're like, hey, you can take it this far with this stuff, but like, if you're looking to get this far, we should definitely start talking about some of this stuff. Cause in my world, we talk about in business, like I'll use a simple example. You got to earn ads, you got to earn funnels, in the bodybuilding world, you have to earn the steroids. Like a beginner just needs the basics.
Yeah.
So like when it comes to optimizing your energy, your focus, your health, like what do I need to get in order first before I'm like, okay, now I'm going to get the full effectiveness? Or do you have a different perspective on that? No, we can start right away.
The foundation is nutrition.
Okay.
Especially for an entrepreneur to be able to function cognitively, you must manage your nutrition. And there is a lot of noise and a lot of narrative in the nutrition space. One must be able to see through any kind of trends. And, when I think about nutrition, I think entrepreneurs do very, very well eating in a time restricted way. It allows them to manage calories. We also have to account for this idea that cortisol is probably ebbing and flowing. So creating structure, for example, a lot of my patients eat from 10 to 6 or 11 to 7 or 12 to 8. We start on their first meal, in the morning, they might fast, and their first meal of the day, is typically optimized for protein.
Mm-hmm.
Optimized for protein, you match it with a carbohydrate, minimize any kind of blood sugar regulation swings, make it very simple, have them feed, get them out for a walk. I don't care if it's 10 minutes, you're out the door, like go.
Yeah.
Eat 10 minutes for a walk, come back, do your next major work block. And then you might have another meal. You might have 3 meals in that day. And then when that 8 p.m. hits, or, when that night is done, that meal is done. You have to optimize for protein as an entrepreneur. Number one, well, I'm biased because I believe muscle is the organ of longevity. But number two, you do have to manage total calories. And as entrepreneurs, I will find that there's one thing that I do see that happens early on in an entrepreneur's career who's really building is there's a lot of external discipline and very little self-discipline. External discipline, which is the wisdom to be able to get all the other stuff like, I have to get this done. These people are counting on me. These ads have to get done. And they're very disciplined to execute, to show up for that.
Yeah.
Very little internal discipline. I am so tired. I'm just going to eat this TV dinner. I'm going to just eat this protein bar. I can't be bothered.
Yep. That's what happened to me. Yeah.
So
skipping meals and just,
Vince, what you are saying, brother, is that you are predictable. You are a predictable entrepreneur, and you didn't plan for that, which is every entrepreneur.
Wow. So this is encouraging as well right now. So it's interesting. So you have this mindset that you have this capacity that I can, starve myself all day. And then, but then, then I binge on my kids' snacks and their desserts and then et cetera.
Exactly.
So
you have to put in that structure. And typically that's why I start with a time restricted window, because entrepreneurs are busy. You don't want to think about it. We set it up. This is what we do. First meal's at 10. You have a midday meal. Maybe it's at 1. And then you have another meal. Your midday meal is 1. Then maybe you have a snack at 4 and dinner at 6. And that's it.
Do you optimize for whole food? Is that how, because I came from the Charles Poliquin world, and if you want to look solid,
Charles,
food.
Wait, did you know that Charles was one of my very, very, very dear friends?
I didn't know that. No.
Do you know that I'm the first female physician he ever endorsed?
I did not know that.
I was also with him 2 weeks before he passed away.
Oh, jeez. He was a legend. Like, every single trainer who's listening to this, if they don't know, they have him to thank for the entire industry. If you have a job in the fitness industry, it's because of him. I actually have his dumbbells right around the corner here in my gym. I bought them off of him at a muscle camp.
Amazing.
I said, where did you get these? And he goes, you want them? And so he sold them to me and had them delivered. And so I definitely got some experiences with him in person at some of his camps, and they were always highly educational and entertaining.
Yeah. So he was a very, very dear friend.
Oh, wow.
I actually went and taught for him.
Oh, did you?
I did. Yeah. I taught these concepts of muscle-centric medicine, and Charles was a perfect example of everything that I'm saying. In terms of, the higher that he got, perhaps the less he was taking care of himself. And although he got better.
Let's kind of really dig in a bit. And I have some questions. So, and I love to hear, so I'm 53 days into 75 hard, and what I've been doing, and I believe that feedback is the breakfast of champions. So I'm a student. I love to learn. So I'm really interested in your feedback. And I've been essentially creating my own protocol, and it's been red meat. And I just want to kind of give it some context too, because I'm the guy that goes to a lot of people for advice. And a part of the reason it's a very advantage. It's one of my strengths, but at the same time, sometimes I already know the answer. I've been in the fitness industry for 15 years, and sometimes I already have plenty of workouts. I just need to do it. And I choose to be confused instead of just taking ownership.
I want to come back to this. Okay.
Okay.
Can I interject something here?
Absolutely.
There are patient archetypes that I see, right? So there's this, there's the group of patients that I take care of, right? These are the people that are out there to change the world. This is my greatest privilege. The other part is within that group, there are archetypes, and there is one archetype that is too many cooks in the kitchen. This is a form of distraction. Those patients, if you continue down that road, right, they never get better.
Wow.
They will get a physician opinion over here. They'll get another over here. That is a form of distraction, and they are the worst performing patients when it comes to health and wellness in terms of progressing and protecting them from themselves. They will always stay at a very minimal health and fitness level. So I'm glad that you have talked yourself out of that.
Yeah. And so here I am. Yeah. And maybe this is now going to be a really interesting, conversation. So I feel like the reason I'm making progress is because there's no cooks in the kitchen.
That's exactly right.
I'm going back to I'm going back to self-discipline. I'm going back to consistency. I'm outside 45 minutes every single day. I'm doing yoga as one of my workouts indoors, and weights. And I'm going back to just, the workouts that work best for me. And I've dropped from 226 down to 210. Now I've been stuck for the last 3 weeks, and I haven't tracked calories. I've just been having meat-based meals twice per day, fasting 18 hours a day. And I'm now starting to wonder, okay, maybe I need to start tracking the calories. I'm doing 4 liters of water a day. Maybe I need to start fueling these workouts a bit more, because the output's not really increasing. It's kind of the same.
Yeah.
So just maybe some insights on progress when you're hitting plateaus. Like, what do you start to look at first? Like, hey, let's start with let's make sure you're on check with these things before we start getting fancy. Cause that's my tendency to do something extreme as opposed to
which is phenomenal and makes you so good at your job.
Okay.
And you would never spend money and do something in your business that you weren't tracking, right?
True.
But you're willing to do that with your most important commodity.
facts, but not a proud fact that I'm making.
You have to track. You have to track. And also 2 meals a day isn't necessarily ideal for improving body composition.
Okay.
Right? If you were my patient, what I would do is, I would certainly consider 3 meals within that time period. And, understanding, if we were looking for weight loss, you would do 3 structured meals. And I know people are going, 3 meals. Well, there's a reason. The reason is because it allows for blood sugar regulation. You don't want ebbs and flows of blood sugar. You don't want increases in cortisol. You want to try to minimize insulin effects. However, I will say that calories are the most important. It is a calorie issue. You cannot overconsume calories. However, there is this thermic effect of food for optimizing for protein over a period of time. You also will be able to sustain your workouts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who knows? Maybe the fact is that you're actually under eating. And maybe you've done really well for a couple months, and now your metabolism is starting to slow, and maybe your thyroid is changing, and maybe your hormones are affected. All of this is possible. You're going through possibly metabolic adaptation.
Yep.
You have to restructure your nutrition. Well, number 1, you have to track. Number 2, I recommend you restructure your nutrition into if you're eating in an 8 to 9 hour window, which it sounds like you're fasting for a little bit longer than that, I would reduce that. Fasting in and of itself can actually, it can impact hormones. It can impact cortisol. The body can interpret it as a stressor.
I'd love to for you to just chat on that for a sec too, because I think that I've seen a lot of guys use it. I always had an issue with intermittent fasting because I knew who the guys were who were using it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you're just lazy, man. You just found something that works and I'm also like, I also love it, but then I kind of judged them based on why they were doing it.
Right.
Not because of the tool itself, but I'm like, dude, you just don't want to make your meal. So, and I think that happened to me. I'm like, if there's science to support this, I'm going to just definitely jump on this. But I think it's starting to, I don't know, it's getting dull maybe, or like what you just said.
Well, I think that the human spirit thrives off challenge. The human spirit is designed for challenge. The human body is designed for challenge. Ultimately, if we shifted the concept to strong medicine, we would not be in the predicament that we are in general, in all of the world. So there is something to be said for strong medicine, and changing and challenging yourself. 2 meals a day is not working for you. This long periods of fasting is allowing you to sneak in back to old habits, which would be not eating all day. That's easy for you.
Yeah.
But now to become disciplined, to do 3 meals, to not be fasting for extended periods of time may be beneficial for you.
I love that mindset. Yeah, it is because maybe the idea. So I had my meals delivered to my house, and
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm actually now measuring out, brought me back to my bodybuilding days of measuring out, 8 ounces of protein, 8 ounces of sweet potatoes, but they take freaking 20, 30 minutes to eat. So now I have to like rewire my brain that there's value in sitting and eating here. What are your thoughts on, like, somebody says, but Dr. Gabrielle, Leon, I cannot I can't take an hour out of my day to eat 2 meals.
No one is saying that you have to take an hour out of your day. So my husband is a former SEAL. That dude can eat. I have seen him inhale food faster than any human on the planet. It is not true. You can get that food in, and it doesn't have to be. Also,
faster? Or are you saying like kind of just be more?
I'm being facetious. The reality is you can sit and work and eat.
Got it.
That's the reality. The reality is that is just another form of having some resistance. So this is another component to the entrepreneur, to the predictable entrepreneur. And actually also my athletes, some of my Olympians are like this. They don't like being told what to do.
Interesting.
There is an inherent rebellion within them where they don't like being told what to do. And if you leave that unexamined, then you cannot navigate around it. So let me break something down for you. There is the what to do, and that's kind of the knowledge. And the knowledge, as long as you really trust the person who's providing the knowledge, there's no knowledge deficit. Arguably nowadays there may be, because everything is so confusing, but overall, what there is there's a behavior deficit. And we have to, there's the what, there's the how, there's the what to do, which is I'm going to do 75 hard. I'm going to do 3 meals a day. And then there's the internal logistics of the how to do it. That how to do it is that navigation of that internal infrastructure, the inner monologue, the attributes necessary, the self-worth gauge, the components that actually drive the behavior and the reward. That stuff, that needs to be so tight and is so overlooked in an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are fast. It is externally driven, external discipline. The internal discipline must be cultivated. And not only the internal discipline, but understanding the way in which they work so deeply that they can navigate the landmines.
There was a lot there. And I was thinking the behavioral deficits, when you said the how to do it, like that's what I'm thinking. That's where, and obviously that's where the mentorship, the coaching comes in for your own situation. And, starting to problem solve these different things, for somebody who travels a lot or somebody who has kids.
That's adaptability. That's all stuff I work with. Yes. That is all fixed. That is so easy. That is so easy.
Those are the solutions. Yeah.
It is understand. Let me give you an example. I hope I didn't cut you off.
Keep going. Yeah. No, I want you to do that. They don't want to hear me. They want to hear you.
I mean, this is really important, especially as a physician that takes care of entrepreneurs. These are things that are really important. There's some key attributes, which are traits individuals are born with, that we're all born with, right? There's the courage. And early on in an entrepreneur's journey, this courage isn't at a very high level. And I don't mean courage in their business. I mean courage, they have to feel courageous to have the body and the health that they deserve. And sometimes, for example, some of my women entrepreneurs, they might not feel like they deserve the body that they've always wanted, or they might feel exposed if they're in great shape, or, there's a whole slew of internal monologues that happen. Notice I didn't say dialogue, because the dialogue means you're conscious of it and have to address it.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. That's the most important conversation you're having.
Right. So there's this courage trait, or, the courage to be able to surpass self-discipline, because sometimes being hungry is uncomfortable. Sometimes training, you're doing 75 hard. You know what? If you have to do it at 9 p.m. and you committed to it, that sucks.
Yeah. There's been a lot of those days.
Right. And then there's an adaptability attribute. This adaptability trait is really planning for the capacity that you're going to be traveling. It's not a shock, Vince, if you know that you are going to give a talk in Nashville. You're going to get on the plane. There's going to be a lot of snacks. You're probably going with your kids. You don't want to pack a meal because it's annoying and weird to eat that on the plane, even if it's a private plane, like whatever it is. There's a whole slew of things that can happen. And then when you get there, you're going to be too tired to train.
Yep. I already know that. Yeah.
So we plan for this.
Yeah. It's really good. So I know when I prepare, I always come back like I have to make all these decisions beforehand. And I think that was like one of the biggest problems. There was no plan, right? Like when I travel, like what restaurant are we going to? Are we getting the hotel near a Whole Foods? Are we bringing any
100%.
food? Are we preparing the food the night before? It is. And I think there's like, really, I have to do all of this. It's like, it's not worth it. And that's the negotiations, like so much effort. I'll just fast. So, how do you start to coach somebody to expect more from themselves and just to raise their standards? Because that's like,
yes.
So when I go to a restaurant, I'm the weird one now. When I go out with all my friends, because they saw me before this and like, oh, you're still on that thing. You're not drinking. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be relying on my personality tonight, guys.
That is hilarious. And you're probably very successful at that. This is what becomes very important to understand. And what I do with a lot of my patients is this idea, it's called present bias. There's you right now. There's an individual right now who is tired, overworked, been working 12 hours because they're trying to raise money. And, there's cookies there. I'm just going to have one. My kids are asleep. They finally went to bed. I'm just going to have one. I know that I promised I was going to start my diet. I know I need to take care of myself. I'm like, I can't believe I'm getting fat. Like, where did this come from? I've always been so fit. And then they put it off till tomorrow and they forget their future self. And they believe that this person now, if they negotiate with it, they never reach their future self. The pain of the moment and present behavior, you have to work on that. Because if individuals execute in that mediocre zone where they're just making excuses for themselves, they will sacrifice their long-term future. And when that present reality becomes so painful, to understand that if you continue, the chances are, if you're doing something today, there's a 95% chance you will do that tomorrow. And then there's another chance that you will do it the next day. That's the way humans are wired. Change is very difficult. We are not wired to have to cognitively put effort into doing things.
Right.
It's just not the way that it works. When you fast forward that perspective, and this could be anything, for example, this could be putting off the book that you're writing, right? So for example, if I'm in the middle of writing a book, I wake up extraordinarily early to get in 2 hours of writing before my children even wake up. Whether it's 4:30 or 5, that's early. And I work all day, right? So this idea that I could just sleep in and it would be comfortable. Well, what's going to happen when this book that is so meaningful to the world doesn't really get written or gets written haphazardly?
Right.
The pain of that.
Right.
I remind myself of that every day. And if individuals and entrepreneurs, so yeah, it could be total hassle to go to Whole Foods and do all that stuff. But, what is the pain that an individual is going to suffer in the next month, 2 months, 3 months? It's going to be great. And then they have to step on stage at a huge event and they look like a slob because they weren't able to have internal discipline. That's going to be painful.
Yeah. How long is it going to take? Like I've been shocked by how quickly I've changed things. And one of the reasons things are changing is because I have 2 accountability groups and we have to report in at the end of the day. And I kind of this is going to take a long time. When you're committed, the changes happen quick. And I guess, I love to hear, I'm talking to my brother, like he's in my group as well. And we're like, what are we going to do after this? Cause my fear is like, I'm going to revert. And, I can do this for 12 weeks or I can do this until this date. And, what issues are you seeing if somebody has this whole thing? I can't wait until this is over so I can have a cheat meal, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like you're doing it with the means to an end, as opposed to, I don't know how to phrase this, but like this, like you actually embrace this new identity, these new disciplines. Like the reward isn't like what you'll look like, the external, but it is truly internal. Like when I step into a room, I know I'm a badass, in the room, and there's nobody here who's got anything on me. Nobody here can make me hurt because I know I've already put myself out in the -10 weather this morning, running hard for 45 minutes. There's nothing you can do to me or say to me right now that's going to hurt me. Like, how do you get to that reward of internal versus external? Because I think that's what a lot of people are driven by. Just they want the external validation. Look, I did it once.
Humans are driven by reward, and reward and pain are kind of very similar. I think goal setting initially is great. That is the entry point. That is the way in which you can get to someone's underbelly, have them hit a goal, and then have them set a standard.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. That's really good. Set a goal.
Have them hit a goal as an underbelly, as an entry point for excellence. Move that to then setting a standard for extraordinary health.
So the new standard for me is going to be,
We got to come up with it.
Never more than 205, always able
No,
to do
that is not what we're going to do. That is not how we're going to do it.
Let's do it.
You are going to do 75 hard. You are going to crush that shit. And then it's going to be over and you're going to have your cheat meal. Halfway through that cheat meal, you're not even going to want it because you're not even that person anymore. Then we're going to send a new standard. Humans thrive under competition. I know I was like, don't compete. Yes, you should compete. You should strive for an extraordinary life. Isn't a stressless life. An extraordinary life is one full of stress. It's just being able to be and having the capacity to manage it. So I say we come up with something else. I say we know you're going to do 75 hard and you've already proven that you're going to crush it. Now it's just the mental gymnastics of some days you don't want to do it and some days you do. And now it's really easy. I'm not even impressed with your 75 hard anymore now because you've mastered it. You set a goal, you're crushing the goal. Now, when that ends, we have to set a new standard.
I really like that.
So what is it going to be? I think 75 hard, listen, and now, first of all, I think it's incredible. I haven't done it. I need to do it. I had 2 babies back to back, probably an excuse, but having babies is, and listen, there are people that have done 75 hard and had a baby. So maybe that will be my thing. I'll do it.
Yeah. And the big thing for Sally defines it as is a mental toughness challenge. A lot of people use it for, different goals, but yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's totally, but I believe that this is now something, what I'm hearing from you is this something that you mastered.
What you're saying is so interesting. So I used to be a competitive distance runner, and I started this off with my outdoors as just walks. And there's definitely something to be said about not being stupid on this, right? If I get hurt on day 2, because I'm running and it's -10 and it's icy out, I wasn't super smart. So I've been managing, where I walk, also I'm heavier, so I don't want to beat up my joint. So I've been taking a pretty intelligent approach to the progression with the cardio, but now I'm at walk 1, run 2, walk 1, run 2 for the 45 minutes. And what's really interesting is that I have found that my body is adapting because my mind isn't quitting. And most people, you think, are you taking a day off? Or you're recovering? Or, I've been a runner, so we use periodization charts, up, 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 down, up, 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 down. And interestingly, my body's adapting. And I had this thought, I'm like, it's only 23 days left, but I wonder if I could run a sub 45 minute 10K in the next 23 days. That thought has not crossed my mind for over 10 years. Now, I used to run a sub 33 minute or sub 34 minute 10K in my running days. The thought of running continuously for 10K under 45 minutes, it's just these new ideas, these new standards, they just came out of they didn't come from a podcast I was listening to. It just popped out.
Love it. I love it. So that should be in place before you're done with 75 hard.
Right. And that's what's happening. So I guess what it's really neat, I guess, is when you start this journey, you're going to start discovering all this stuff about yourself. You're going to start setting these new standards. Right. And is that how I guess I'd love to hear, also even a challenge from a nutritional standpoint, how far can I take this? Because, now you've got so much information. I sometimes wonder, are these actually legitimate hacks or techniques, or how deep does this rabbit hole go when I get my structure dialed in, I get my sleep, my hour before, I got my, blocking the light with my glasses, I'm not consuming social media. How deep can we really take this? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it becomes really important to not be distracted, right? There's a lot of different things, cold plunge, a million different things that individuals can do. Excellence requires focus, and excellence requires internal discipline and external discipline. That includes the idea of all the information coming in. Typically, excellence doesn't happen by doing a whole bunch of things. At least I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it professionally. I haven't seen it with the highest performing individuals that you can even imagine. They are laser focused.
Right.
On picking the thing and executing on the thing.
So they're not getting ready for the Ironman, also doing CrossFit, getting ready for a bodybuilding.
Not at all. And And some of, the Olympians, or, this one in particular that I'm thinking, phenomenal at, this is the challenge that we are tackling. This is the thing right now that we are tackling.
Huh. So there is something called capacity.
And I will say this, and I don't want people, I don't want the entrepreneurs listening to feel good about this.
Huh.
The suffering capacity of an entrepreneur is exponentially higher, or I should say all high level performers have a way in which they can tolerate suffering above and beyond a normal human.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think with that knowledge, one has to become very, very, very careful. It's almost like a secret weapon, but it's a secret weapon that is also an individual's kryptonite.
Wow. Yeah. With every strength, there's a kryptonite. Wow. I love that. Maybe this would be a good place for us to kind of wind down here. I'd love for you to kind of speak to this, because I heard one of my mentors talk about how oftentimes the most successful people aren't the hardest working necessarily, but they're, how did he say it? They're willing to sacrifice the most. And sometimes what they're willing to sacrifice isn't necessarily healthy. They might be willing to sacrifice, relationships with loved ones. And now, you crossed the finish line, you got all those gold medals, but you're literally alone now. And I love to hear kind of like, maybe, I love the idea of like having these high standards. And I've met people who, I don't drink, I don't do this. I personally love wine. One of my favorite pastimes for my wife and I is going to wine country. And I can't imagine a life without red wine. Even like, I would love to get to a point where I can control it and it doesn't control me, where we have a beautiful wine cellar. It's loaded. We have some of the best wine in our home. But I want to be able to look at it and not feel like it's pulling me, but that, hey, when I've achieved this, I'm going to treat myself. So what's your, there's certain people that have their certain maybe vices. Maybe just talk about how you build the vices in, or when you build the vices in, or how do you bring that back in, or when are you ready to, start managing with things that maybe, is it an all or none approach, or what have you seen?
Depends on your personality.
Okay.
Individuals, you have to know yourself. I think vices are very helpful because they actually can leverage an individual. They create consequences. For example, if I told you, hey Vince, I need you to execute this, this, and this in this way, and then your reward is going to be a lovely dinner with your wife, and you guys are each going to structure it, have 2 glasses of wine, and that's going to be it. You would knock that out of the park.
Yeah.
It has to have a structure to the vice.
I love it. Okay. Last question for today. How do you reset? I'm out. I feel like I'm out, how do I get back on track? So you take a trip, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like lot of people, I'm off track. Like, you say, oh, it's just one more day. It's just one more week. It's just, just one more trip. And then next, that's what happened to me for 3 freaking years. Every single weekend there was a party, or there's like, it's so-and-so's birthday this weekend. I can't start this weekend. So, and next thing you know, 3 years has gone by. So those small complacencies just got translated into massive comfort, massive compromise. And now you're in a state of like, you don't even feel like you can go back. I'm like, is this even recoverable? Is it even worth starting? That was the mindset I was in before the new year.
There's a couple components to this. Number one, you caught the disease of comfort. Good news is there's a treatment for that. And that's actually resiliency. What you describe is you were unable to bring yourself up to an emotional baseline. You were constantly saying, whether it was negative things, it was probably negative things that you were saying to yourself, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and you were keeping that attribute of resiliency very low. People think of resiliency as just being able to go out and be strong and do, but resiliency, there's a component of what's called emotional resiliency. And it's this ability to bring yourself up to a neutral, to a baseline. You weren't able to do that. And you're not alone. This is commonly I see, if an individual cannot bring themselves up to a baseline, then they will continue down that road. It'll be a year, it'll be 2 years, they will continue to grow that disease of comfort. Very predictable. That's predictable. This is the predictable entrepreneur. It's predictable. You must account for that. You must have a contingency plan. I'll give you an example. I'll leave you with his example.
Okay.
I had a baby 11 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was in incredible shape in December. We went to California. We stayed there for a month. We're eating out all the time. I had put on I'm very tiny human. I'm a 5'1" human, 100.
You're only 5'1"? Wow.
Very tiny.
So you're my wife's height.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I put on all this weight.
I told you, you got to sit on my lap or go back upstairs. You want to give Daddy a quick kiss, quick?
Wait, I'm moody actually, and I'm moody here because God, we're gonna go watch it today.
Okay, baby. We're going to the movies, I guess.
Very cute. So I had a baby and I was in amazing shape, abs, everything. Went to California and, we ate and we didn't train really hard. And I came back heavier. And, as your wife knows, as a tiny human, you're like, oh my God. Took me a month to even get back on the train. And I had very little emotional resiliency to bring myself up to baseline. And then I realized there's in case of emergency, break glass, you have to have the contingency plan of, I called one of my best friends, Roxy, the person who runs my practice. I'm like, you're meeting me at 6:30 every morning and we're driving to the gym, pick me up or you're fired. I immediately put restraints on myself to bring my emotional resiliency up. You have to take action.
As a female, if you don't mind me asking, do you ever get certain thoughts? So my wife says oftentimes, she's shorter as well. And she has a friend, she's European, she's super tall. And, she says she can't put a pound on no matter how hard she tries.
Yeah.
How do you kind of manage just that chitter chatter, if you will, around, I have to work harder than everybody else kind of thing? I don't know if that's how you.
I don't think about that. If I'm not working hard at something, I feel like it's unworthy.
So it's worth the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't.
It's always worth the work.
That's really powerful. Well, I think that's a great spot to wrap up. Did you say before we start recording, you have a book coming out as well?
I'm working on my first book. Yeah. The manuscript is due August 1st. I'm working very hard. And this book is going to redefine medicine.
Tell me about it. I'd love to hear for you.
Yeah.
Maybe plant some seeds for us.
Yeah. This book is the first of its kind, and it is going to redefine what we know and how we see the diseases of human nature, or not human nature, but the humanness. Yeah. Right now we are obesity centric, fat phobic, everything is lose weight, all this stuff. We have failed to solve that problem because we've actually been looking at the wrong tissue, the wrong organ, which is muscle, is going to protect and change the way in which we age. It is at the root cause of obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, autoimmunity. Skeletal muscle can modulate autoimmunity. Muscle is a metabolic organ. It is an organ that really only exists right now in the way in which we see it in fitness. That's not what it does. It is above and beyond that. That is like one pinky of what this does. And if we begin to look at blood work through the lens of the exercising muscle post-training, if we begin to look at it as our body armor and the fact that it secretes myokines and that these are measurable, then we can actually change the interface of medicine.
I love it.
Because it's the solution.
I want to hit. I'm so excited for my weight training workouts. It's just stuff that you hear, you've just really invigorated life into, concepts that we often take for granted, such as, structure and tracking and discipline and muscle for that matter. The term muscle. I'm I love this concept, healthy muscle. I'm just thinking about something I never thought about 45 minutes ago.
So, muscle is an immune modulator. When you contract it, it releases myokines. And among other things, it actually it's a different pathway than, say, an immune cell releasing a cytokine, which they are the same molecule, but it triggers different pathways. Skeletal muscle releases things into the bloodstream that create a crosstalk and an interface with all other organs. So people are looking for the quote fountain of youth externally.
Right.
When it actually is by consciously directing our muscle, we can move this organ to become an internal fountain of youth for real.
Wow.
So anyway.
I'm sure you could go on for a long
I could,
time.
I'm sorry about that.
No,
Yes,
I love
I'm
it.
so
I would
sorry.
love for you to, no, don't say sorry. Of course, this is your passion. This is your work. This is your calling. So I would love for you to share with our listeners, where can people find out more about your work and how can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I am very active on Instagram, and that, please keep in mind, it is a bit unidimensional of what I share there because it's a very small platform. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube, Dr. Gabrielle LYON. I'm actually going to be starting a YouTube podcast show, believe it or not, and they can begin to find that. You can find the link in that on the YouTube channel, Dr. Gabrielle LYON, and of course my website. If you are interested in becoming a patient, it is interview only. And if you know somebody, we turn away 50% of all applicants. So if you are ready to charge hard and train your mind and your body, then, or if you know someone who's a patient, then that's the way to do it.
Did you say charge hard? Ready to go hard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Do they work specific privately with you?
Depends. Depends on the person.
Amazing. Okay. Well, hey, I'm fascinated now about how you set up your entire business, and maybe in the near future, we'll talk about how to have you come back. And I'd love to hear about how you're reaching and expanding your message through your business, etc. Maybe on another day. How's that sound?
I would love it. I would love it. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Well, hey, now it's your turn to pay the fee, if you will, pay it forward, and share this podcast on social media, on Instagram. If you got somebody on your cell phone you're thinking of right now who needs to hear this, please just share it with them. And we want to make sure we don't keep this information to yourself, but to inspire other people to expand in all areas of life and to improve. And thank you so much for listening. And we'll talk to you all next time. Ciao, ciao.